On Biological Diversity. The Convention on Biological Diversity, adopted at the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, has 42 articles plus an annex. These articles lay out its objective, obligation, application of party, mechanism for cooperation, and implementation measure. And Article 8 मा चाहिँ objective है त objective छ conservation, sustainable use and fair and equitable benefit sharing from genetic resources सेयर गरिसकेपछि त्यसपछि use of term definition for key terms 3 मा छ principle चाहिँ state have sovereign right over their natural resources and 4 मा छ jurisdictional scopes छ where and how the convention applies and cooperation चाहिँ 5 मा encouragement of international cooperation and general measure for conservation and sustainable use, national strategy plan and program, and identification and monitoring key component of biodiversity to be identify and monitor. 8 मा in situ conservation, habitat and species conservation within natural ecosystem. 9 मा ex situ conservation outside natural resources. त्यसपछि चाहिँ 10 मा छ सस्टेनेबल युज अफ अब एक्सिदो इन्सिटु गरिसकेपछि सस्टेनेबल युज अफ कम्पोनेन्ट गर्नु पर्यो बायोलोजिकल डाइभर्सिटी एन्ड इन्करेजमेन्ट अफ सस्टेनेबल युज प्र्याक्टिस त्यसपछि गएर चाहिँ अर्को छ इन्सेन्टिभ्स मेजरहरू promote incentives for conservation and sustainable use and research and training support for scientific and technical education and public education and awareness को कुराहरू raising public's understanding of biodiversity issue impact assessment and minimizing adverse impact environmental impact assessment and access to genetics resource and guidelines for obtaining genetic resource त्यसपछि गएर 16 मा access to and transfer of technology especially for developing country exchange of information sharing biodiversity related information and technical and scientific cooperation joint research and collaboration 19 मा छ handling of biotechnology and distribution of benefit safety measure and benefit sharing from biotechnology 20 मा छ चाहिँ financial resource मा mobilization of financial resources for biodiversity and 21 मा financial mechanism operation of funding systems and 22 मा चाहिँ conference of the parties COP main decision making body and 21 मा secretariat and administrative and coordinating body and 21 मा चाहिँ subsidiary body on scientific technical and technological advice हैन SBSTTA scientific advice body and 25 मा चाहिँ other subsidiary body possible other body established by COP report national reporting requirement and settlement of disputes and mechanism for dispute resolution, and adoption of protocols, development of additional protocols, and Cartagena protocols, and 29 छ amendment to the convention or protocols rules for amendment, and 30 adaptation and amendment of annex, procedures for annex update, 31 right to voting voting rule for parties, and relationship between the convention and its protocols clarifies linkage. त्यसपछि 33 छ signature who may sign and by by when, and 34 छ ratification, acceptance and approval of or accession, procedures for becoming a party. 35 मा entry into force, when the convention becomes legally binding, and reservation provide regarding resignation and withdrawal procedures for leaving the convention, and authentic text चाहिँ official language हुनु पर्यो, authentic text, interim arrangement and temporary measure before full implementation, and deposition depository role of the UN Secretary General, and annex चाहिँ technical detail and additional provision, and 42 final provision concluding formalities. त्यसपछि गएर biodiversity in situ, park people conflict and its impact on conservation, concept of park people conflict refer to a situation where there is disagreement, tension, or uh, or clash between local communities and protected area authority due to restriction, resource use, and wildlife damage of management policy. It may involve conflict between local people and park management, conflict between park visitor and management, conflict between different user group, tourism operators, local communities and conservation agency, and cause of park people conflict चाहिँ restriction on access to forest resources, and fuel fodder and anti-apis, wildlife damage, crop rearing, livestock protection and human injury, and displacement and resettlement issue, and inequitable benefit sharing from tourism, and strict conservation law without community participation, lack of awareness and communication gaps. Okay, and impact of protect park people conflict on conservation, negative impact, increase poaching and illegal activity, and destruction of park infrastructure, forest fire and habitat degradation, reduce cooperation from local communities, and political pressure against conservation policy, decline in wildlife population due to retaliatory king, and positive impact चाहिँ improve participatory conservation approach, and strengthening of better zone buffer zone management, better benefit sharing mechanism, and adoption of community based conservation models, and habitat management चाहिँ habitat management is the art and science of creating, management or managing, maintaining or enhancing condition in the landscapes to meet specific observation for wildlife populations, and the the stability increase or or decline of wild species depends directly on the quality and extent of available habitat. And wildlife management is the art and science of making decision and taking action to manipulate wild to achieve specific human objective. And basic consideration of habitat management, right? Basic consideration of habitat management. Habitat inventory. What does the habitat consist of? Habitat evaluation. How suitable is the habitat for wildlife or conservation object? And habitat monitoring. Is the habitat improving or deteriorating? Essential habitat components like food, water, cover, and food, adequate quality, quantity, quality throughout season. Open water in succulent plant, some species, cover, scape, reproductive nesting, ambush. Objective of habitat management, right? To maintain and restore population growth, indicate of endangered, endemic, rare and vulnerable species. To maintain and restore habitat quality and catchment capability. To establish mechanism and create opportunity to enhance wildlife management capacity. To improve institutional and scientific knowledge. And issue of management, habitat related issue, habitat fragmentation, degradation and forest fire, overgrazing, overexploitation of entropy. Management related issue, poaching, human wildlife conflict, include enclave settlement, unbalanced tourism development. And legal aspect, weakness in wildlife protection law, bailable, non-cognizable offense, delay in justice delivery, improper disposal of seized wild product, lack of knowledge of related act. And administrative issue चाहिँ infrastructure constraint, vacancy of frontline staffs, lack of coordination, lack of trained manpower, low motivation and physical fitness of staffs. Habitat management technique, adjustment of successional stage, the most common form of habitat management. It adjusts the serial stage to make habitat suitable for desired species. Background succession, setting back succession, and forward succession, advancing succession. Manipulation of age habitat boundary between two ecosystems. Many wildlife species use age habitat for nesting, feeding, and movement. Goal, increase food and cover along forest edge by maintaining vegetation layer from herb to tall tree. Wildlife manager modified habitat structure to enhance habitat diversity. Control of damage, a special and important form of habitat management. It compensates habitat loss caused by development by creating similar habitat elsewhere. Method include reducing limited factor, threat reduction, habitat restoration, community participation, awareness program, strict enforcement of law. Conclusion, park people conflict directly affect biodiversity conservation. Sustainable conservation in Nepal require community participation, benefit sharing mechanisms, strong legal enforcement, scientific habitat management, and conflict mitigation measure. Proper habitat management combined with participatory conservation is essential for long-term biodiversity protection in Nepal. I Wildlife research and monitoring. Research is a systematic investigation. Research is a systematic investigation conduct to create, increase knowledge about wildlife habitat, human culture, society, and environment, and to apply that knowledge from management and conservation purposes. Monitoring is the continuous and systematic observation of wildlife population of or habitat using standardized procedures to track change over time. Relationship between research and monitoring. Okay. Research enhance baseline knowledge. Research help identify appropriate monitoring indicators. Monitoring track progress over time, and monitoring detect ecological change. Bo- Both are parallel and quietly important component of wildlife management. Purpose of wildlife research and monitoring: evaluate effectiveness of conservation plan, policy and intervention, and assessment attainment of management goal and objective, detect early warning sign of change in species population or habitat, ensure long-term integration of monitoring in protected area management, and public scientific finding for future reference and policy formulation. Population assessment terms: census, actual count of wildlife individual with details such as sex, age. Okay, example: rhino count in Chitta National Park. And estimate, sampling based estimation when complete census is impractical. Indicate indicators based on indirect sign. Call, example: call, pug mark, droppings, and nest. Important of wildlife research and monitoring: determine population size and population trend, identify species at risk or surplus and population, assume habitat requirement and management effectiveness, understand population dynamics, growth rate, mortality rate, and fluctuation, and support evidence based conservation planning. Factor affecting resource and monitoring में चाहिँ size of study area, species type, rare, common, natural, and diurnal. Habitat type: dense forest, grassland, or woodland. And active pattern of species, social structure of species, and required precision, and cost, personal and equipment availability. Method of wildlife census and monitoring: direct method, total count, line to transit count, capture recapture method, roadside count. Indirect method में चाहिँ pugmark census, plate group count, camera trapping, water holes count, nest count, call count, change in ratio method, and scant station survey. Techniques चाहिँ transit survey, used for conspicuous vertebrata. Transit are placed systematically or randomly, directly between transit. डेन्स हेबिटाटमा 150 देखि 200 मिटर र ओपन हेबिटाटमा 250 देखि 500 मिटर. स्ट्रिप विथ नियर बेल्ट 25 मिटर इच साइड फर डेन्स हेबिटाट, वाइडर बेल्ट फर ओपन हेबिटाट. पपुलेसन डेन्सिटी फर्मुला: डेन्सिटी इज इक्वल्स टू नम्बर अफ इन्डिभिजुअल अब्जर्भ इज इक्वल्स टू एरिया सर्भेड. ओके, इफ 40 डियर आर अब्जर्भ इन 2 km स्क्वायर, डेन्सिटी 40/2 चाहिँ 20 डियर पर km स्क्वायर. एन्ड वाइल्ड लाइफ रिसर्च एन्ड मोनिटरिङ: camera trapping, automated camera trapped by motion or infrared sensor, and sustainable for rare nocturnal animal, wide, widely used in tiger sensor with capture recapture models, and capture recapture formula चाहिँ capture recapture formula n1 into n2 by m. Okay, and estimated total population n1, number of individual capture the first season, and n2 number of individual capture in second season, and m number of individual capture in both season. Okay, advantage चाहिँ non-invasive method, provide visual record, useful for species identification and limitation, high cost, risk of damage of or theft, and may capture non-target species. Okay, plate group count, based on counting fecal plate to estimate herbivores population, require known of species specific defecation rate. Deer density formula, deer density is a plate group density upon plate per deer per given plate. Okay, useful for estimating population size of ungulates in forest, and DNA analysis, non-invasive method using scat, face, or hair sample, help in species identification and genetic study. एप्लिकेसन चाहिँ डाइरेक्ट एनालाइसिस, movement tracking, population genetics, and reduce misidentification issue compared to visual survey, and radio collaring GPS training चाहिँ involve fitting animal with transmitter to study movement, home range, and habitat use, and the type of collar. Okay, type of collar, VSF collar, manual sign tracking, low cost, and satellite collar. Okay, location data transmitted by satellite, suitable for remote areas, and GPS collar send precise location data in real time by mobile or satellite, and guideline, collar weight should not exceed 4 to 5% of the animal body weight, and useful for long term monitoring of movement and habitat selection and home range. त्यसपछि गएर वाइल्ड लाइफ research and monitoring in Nepal, history over 40 years of research and monitoring in protected area, focus mostly species oriented studies and targeting endangered mammals like tiger, rhino, and snow leopard. Current need more comprehensive multidisciplinary long-term monitoring program, common techniques, total count, block count, transit survey, camera trapping, plate group count, radio, GPS tracking, DNA analysis, and human wildlife conflict. Any interaction between human and wildlife that result in negative impact, human life, social and economic, wild conservation, the environment, impact, crop and livestock loss, poverty, damage, human injury or death, economic loss, and threat to wildlife conservation. Significant, recognized global as a major challenge for wildlife conservation, cause of human wildlife conflict, competition for space and resource. Uh, Human and wildlife compete for limited land, water, and food. Habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation. Logging, encroachment, agriculture expansion, animal husbandry, and development projects shrink wildlife habitat. And improper habitat management. Okay, improper habitat management, mismanagement of habitat inside protected area, increase wildlife movement into human area, limited awareness. Local communities may lack understanding of wildlife behavior and conservation need. Um, Irrational component, compensation, irrational compensation, poorly or delayed compensational for crop livestock damage, encourage negative altitude and towards wildlife. And see driver force चाहिँ पहिला गभर्मेन्ट growing intents of tourism and across of region, increased number of livestock, habitat loss and degradation, climate factor and fire, and land use transformation, altitude perception, attitude perception, abundance and distribution of wild prey, human population growth, uh, okay, and human wildlife conflict and it important on conservation in Nepal, impact on wild conservation, threat to wildlife. Threat to wildlife, okay, threat to wildlife. Threat to wildlife, impact on wildlife, threat to wildlife. Animal are often injured or killed in relation retaliation for crop livestock damage or human casualties. Direct persecution threaten endangered and vulnerable species, disrupting ecological balance and habitat fragmentation मा चाहिँ human modified habitat to reduce conflict and clearing forest and mm, erecting barrier. Fragmentation isolates population, reduce access to resource and impeded gene flow, increasing extinction risk and disruption of natural behaviors. Wildlife may change foraging, migration or habitat used to avoid human and behavioral change reduce reproduction, productive success and disturbs ecosystem dynamic and negative attitude and perception है negative attitude and perception. Repeated conflict create hostility towards wildlife and reduce local cooperations can hinder conservation incentives and economic losses, crop riding and livestock production and property damage create financial burden. Economic loss may lead community to prioritize short-term gain over long-term conservation, shifting in conservation priorities. Resource may be diverted to conflict mitigation, fence compensation, intents of broad conservation, habitat protection and anti-poaching awareness campaign and conflict management effect in Nepal. Physical barrier physical barrier, electrical fencing to prevent elephant and other wild from entire human settlement, and habitat management, proper maintenance of wild habitat in inside and around protected area. Park people buffer zone conflict, 30-50% of the park income allocated for local development, community participation in park management, improvement, coexistence. Wildlife compensation directive 2069, compensation for damage, ह्युमन कजल्टिज चाहिँ 10,000 देखि 10 लाख है। त्यसो लाइभ स्टक 10,000 देखि 30,000, क्रप ड्यामेज 10,000। ओके, त्यसपछि कम्युनिटी बेस एप्रोचेस हेरौँ। कम्युनिटी बेस एप्रोचेस, handing over buffer zone community forest to local communities, financial and technical support for buffer zone community forest, community development works, and resource fund maintain in buffer zone user committee operational plan and conservation program at societal level, landscape level management, tal, sal, chal, KSHL, community based conflict reduction teams, community based anti poaching unit, and district level wildlife crime control bureau in 28 डिस्ट्रिक्टमा छ है त, 28वटा डिस्ट्रिक्टमा। त्यसपछि गएर मिटिगेसन मेजर चाहिँ कम्युनिटी बेस्ड नेचुरल रिसोर्सेस म्यानेजमेन्ट, मिटिगेसन स्ट्राटेजीमा चाहिँ कम्युनिटी बेस्ड नेचुरल रिसोर्स म्यानेजमेन्ट। एन्ड त्यसपछि अर्को छ इन्सेन्टिभ्स प्रोग्रामको कुराहरू, इन्सेन्टिभ प्रोग्राम। त्यसपछि इन्सुरेन्स, त्यसपछि हाम्रो कम्पेन्सेसन प्रोग्राम, त्यसपछि बेनिफिट सेयरिङ अफ इन्कम रेभेन्यू। ओके, त्यसपछि वाइल्ड लाइफ ट्रान्सलोकेसन, त्यसपछि रेगुलेटेड हार्भेस्ट। ओके, those are the responsible factor. And soil conservation and watershed management, general concept of soil conservation and watershed management. Okay, soil conservation, protection of land from soil deterioration. Okay, protection of soil from land deterioration and rebuilding eroded depleted soil, conserving moisture for crop, proper drainage and irrigation, and increasing productivity and farm income, and integrated nutrient management, soil correlation, manure, fertilizer and application, and crop rotation, irrigation, drainage, and is part of soil conservation. And objective of soil conservation है, के अब्जेक्सन छ सोइल कन्जर्भेसनको भन्दाखेरि सस्टेनेबल प्रोडक्सन अफ मिट फुड सेल्टर एन्ड क्लोदिङ नीड, एन्ड प्रिजर्भ टप सोइल टु मेन्टेन फर्टिलिटी एन्ड वाटर होल्डिङ क्यापासिटी, एन्ड प्रिभेन्ट रिल एन्ड गल्लिज फर्मेसन, मेन्टेनिङ एन्ड प्रोडक्टिभिटी, एन्ड इन्क्रिज ग्राउन्ड वाटर रिचार्ज बाई रिटेनिङ सोइल मोइस्चर, and maintain land productivity and prevent arable land shrinkage. त्यसपछि reduce sedimentation in river, lake and reservoir, and protect water bodies from non-point source of pollution, minimize flooding risk affecting human, animal and plant, and prevent ecosystem deterioration, nutrients loss and biodiversity decline, and facilitated environmental condition for plant growth and forest rejuvenation, and soil conservation मेथडहरू है। सोइल कन्जर्भेसन मेथडहरू चाहिँ बायोलोजिकल भेजिटेटिभ्स मेथड एन्ड युज अफ trees, shrub and grasses to prevent erosion. And advantage: easy, inexpensive and environmentally friendly. Type of vegetative method चाहिँ multiple cropping growing एक भन्दा बढी crops year per year on same land. Type intercropping, two or more crops together. Wheat and mustard चाहिँ इन्टरक्रोपिङ हुन्छ है त, तोरी र गहुँ र तोरी छर्नु. र रिले क्रोपिङ, सेकेन्ड क्रोप सोन बिफोर हार्भेस्टिङ मेन crop. Okay, रिले क्रोपिङ, सेकेन्ड क्रोप सोन बिफोर हार्भेस्टिङ मेन crop or रिले क्रोप. प्याडी, लेन्टिल. त्यसपछि एले क्रोपिङ, फास्ट ग्रोइङ लेग्युम इन हेजरो. एले क्रोपिङ, fast growing legume in hedgerow crops grow between. Mix cropping, two or more crop together at the same time. Okay, त्यसपछि contour cultivation, plugging along contour line to slow water runoff, prevent erosion and increase water infiltration. Strip cropping, growing crop in stripe band as barriers to wind and water erosion. Types of contour stripe, field stripe and wind stripe cropping. And cover cropping मा चाहिँ planting close growing crops to protect soil between main crops, annual, perennial legume and grasses. Okay, and mulching, layer of straw, leaves, sawdust or paper covering soil. Benefit: reduce evaporation, conservation moisture and suppress wind, prevent runoff and increase water infiltration. Minimum zero tillage चाहिँ minimum tillage, only crop zone tillage and zero tillage not tillage. Prevent compaction, organic matter loss and erosion. Plantation of tree, grasses and bamboos. And plantation on contour, trace bend, riser or border. And function: root anchor soil, canopy protect from random impact. And leaf litter, reduce runoff, increase infiltration. And recommendation: species tree उत्तिस बकाइनो सिरिस, चिलाउने, कटुस, साँप, चिरपाइन, टाँकी, कोइरालो, विभिन्न खालको खन्यो, काब्रो, बडरी, पिलिपिल, दबदबे, बिमल, किम्बु, गोगन, दुधिल्लो, उइलियो, खस्रो एन्ड सिसौँ. सरब, असुरो, भुजेत्रो, धाइरो, सिमल एन्ड किम्बु. Grass, forage, suitable for degraded land improvement and soil protection. Manuring and fertilization. Okay, improve soil fertility and crop. Tree growing using organic matter, fertilizer or green manure crops. Crop rotation, control rotational grazing. Limit number type of livestock and grazing period. Rotational grazing, divided pasture into plot, grazing into rotation for 3 to 7 days with 3 to 5 weeks recovery. And cropping pattern, sequential cropping to maximize moisture, nutrient use without degrading soil. And types say lowland. Okay, lowland, rice, wheat, maize, rice, maize and rice vegetables. And lentil maize. Okay, upland, maize, millet, maize, mustard. Brushwood layering, revegetation techniques, combining soil with dormant root. root cutting to stabilize slopes, gully and stream bank support desired plant species, and blends with existing vegetation. Jute netting, biodegradable soil stabilized for slopes nearly seed areas, preventing washout and wind erosion. Yellow air and water passes safe for soil and water plant. And we can see common name called cultivar, scientific name Cambo.